I swore I would never buy another iPod because I've not had the best luck buying them. My 6th gen Nano had a short battery and the power button failed. A common issue apparently. I had an iPod Classic, but the hard drive inside was on its last legs, causing my MacBook to hang when the iPod was plugged in. And whenever I would put music onto it, it would all get corrupted. Somehow though, I ended up with a nice Nano and Classic. Specifically in this video, I want to talk about the iPod Classic and how you can turn it into a competent modern DAP with a free firmware swap and a cheap Bluetooth dongle. I bought this iPod Classic over a year ago on a whim, since it was relatively cheap compared to the examples over on eBay and in CX. But when I took it back home, I was shocked by how little use it actually had, compared to the condition that it was in. Yeah, not only is the hard drive practically brand new, but the battery had barely degraded. By my calculations, I should be getting around 15 hours to flat, which seems right according to Reddit. Even though I've had this iPod for a while, it's been collecting dust since I hate using iTunes. It doesn't support FLACs, so a large collection of my music has to be converted into MP3s. The metadata editor within iTunes is awful compared to IMP. Half the time, it wouldn't save the metadata correctly, and you have to input the metadata in manually instead of scraping Discogs like IMP does. And of course, any system reinstall means I have to start over from scratch, in terms of making playlists and adding music onto the iPod. And if you live in the EU, or did when the Classic was released, there's a volume limit that you are not able to remove. Not without hacking the original firmware. But all of these issues can be easily solved with Rockbox. And don't worry, there are themes to bring back the iPod UI. In fact, I'm actually really impressed with the amount of themes that Rockbox has to offer. There's a theme that reimagines what an iPod OS would look like if Apple had released a new iPod. And there's an Apple Music theme too. A few years ago, I started a little trend on the iPod subreddit, making mockups of modern Apple interfaces on all iPods. So I'm glad that some really skilled people have made this a reality. Awesome. I am old school with music files. I like to put my music in folders based on the album or the playlist. Thankfully, to load music onto Rockbox is the same as on any generic MP3 player. Just drag and drop your music via the Explorer. Though, don't worry if your music isn't organized. As long as your metadata is right, you can search for artists, albums, or songs via the database function. Although I do wish that the search function was a little less terrible, but what can you do? You get far more customizability in terms of the sound than on stock firmware. Before, you'd have to make the EQ preset in iTunes and then hope that it sounded right on the iPod. Now you can make a custom EQ right on the iPod, or simply mess with the bass and treble adjustments instead to add a little bit more punch or clarity. And as I alluded to before, the max volume is much higher in Rockbox. Believe it or not, Rockbox really does take full advantage of the Cirrus Logic DAC. You can easily hear the difference between a standard MP3 file and a CD quality FLAC. The audio quality isn't quite as clear and sparkly as my LG G5 with its B&O module, but it does sound better than it has any right to for a mass market MP3 player. Oh, and Rockbox is always filled with silly little gimmicks. I made a video playing Doom on my Sans Eclipse a few years ago, an MP3 player the size of my thumb with an OLED display. But since we have a bit more power on board, we can play Duke Nukem 3D. It plays terribly on the click wheel of course, but it looks fantastic on the 320 by 240 display, since I think that is the original resolution of the game. Likewise we have Quake, which doesn't run the best and the controls are even worse, but again, it's impressive that a fully 3D game is being played on something that definitely wasn't built with 3D graphics in mind. As good as the audio sounds however, I don't like being tethered to wires when I'm out and about. For me, wired headphones are for home listening only, so I needed to find a way to add Bluetooth to this iPod, without paying hundreds of euros and having to open this iPod up. Someone on Reddit had a thought however. Before the Switch added Bluetooth audio support, companies were making headphone jack to Bluetooth adapters for the Switch. While these are now rare to find thanks to the update, I managed to snag a generic one from AliExpress for only £6. And oh boy, was that certainly a £6 purchase. The adapter works fine on my Anker Soundcore headphones. Audio quality is a bit rubbish, but it's otherwise fine. But on my Nothing Buds, the audio kept skipping. No matter what settings I changed, it made no difference unfortunately. Also, the adapter seemingly didn't want to charge, or was just extremely slow to do so. So that was a dud, but I was determined to get Bluetooth working. So after spending £7 more, I picked up this portable Bluetooth transmitter and receiver from Amazon. And yeah, this is better. It works, it charges, and it actually sounds decent too, considering it's probably just using SBC. There's a bit of that Bluetooth crust in the audio, but it's really not bad at all, and I can actually get quite far away from the receiver before it starts cutting out. But otherwise that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to check out more iPod videos, I have them linked in the card on the right hand side. Please make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. But otherwise, that's it. Thank you.